is there an analogy, a meaningful analogy, between the modern Republican worldview and the Taliban worldview? And I'm not talking, generically about Republicans. I start out my op-ed today over at Hartman Report talking about how yesterday Louise and I were watching CNN, and there was an ad from this Wall Street funded group, No Labels, singing they are the ones who put together the Problem Solvers Caucus in Washington, D.C. in Congress, talking about the wonders of Kurt Schrader, who is a congressman who represents South Portland and areas south of there. He's a Democrat. But he's one of the 9 Democrats who threatened to blow up the $3.5 trillion piece of legislation, the infrastructure bill. And now Kyrsten Sinema has said she's also a member of this, take money from Wall Street and call yourself a problem solver group, saying that she's not going to vote for it either. These people like Schrader and Sinema, they basically occupy a long and reasonable place in American politics. They are what we used to call Republicans. But nowadays, along with Schrader's 8 buddies in the House of Representatives, and Sinema and Joe Manchin and apparently Chris Coons and Carper, and maybe a few others, I don't know, maybe with Dianne Feinstein, we'll see. But, we used to call these folks Republicans, and, they were kind of the loyal opposition. They sometimes had a reason or excuse or something that sounded at least rational. That is not what is going on today. Today's Republicans are something that Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon would not recognize. As my colleague Dean Obeidallah lays out, and he will be with us in the second hour, but he pointed it out on an MSNBC commentary, neither the Taliban nor today's Republicans think that women should have basically rights in society. Today's Republicans refuse to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. This has been going on since the 1950s. That simply says there shall be no discrimination based on sex, on gender. They are refusing to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. They are trying to put women in prison merely for the act of seeking an abortion when raped. 228 Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives signed a brief before the United States Supreme Court asking them to overturn Roe v. Wade, saying that they were trying to protect women from dangerous abortions while upholding the integrity of the medical profession. Republicans, like the Taliban, don't believe that women should be in the workplace, and so they work to actively discourage them by refusing to vote for legislation ensuring that they get the same pay as men. But that's just the beginning. I mean, while the Democratic Party and the Republican Party pre-2000 still believe in free and fair elections, the Taliban ridicules the idea of democracy, and when elections are held, they do everything they can to intimidate voters, rig the outcome, even threaten politicians with assault or death. The way that the Trump supporters planned to kidnap and hold for trial and then execute Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Or like Republicans stormed the U.S. Capitol trying to assassinate Vice President Mike Pence and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and disrupt the election of 2020. This is Taliban behavior. Neither the Taliban nor the Republican Party believe in democracy. I mean, look at Wisconsin, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, states where statewide a majority of voters vote for Democrats. And yet in North Carolina, for example, after the 2016 election, even though the election in terms of who voted for which party for Congress was about 50-50, they sent 10 Republicans to the House of Representatives and 3 Democrats, even though it was 50-50. Democracy? Ha! Say Republicans. Ha! Say the Taliban. It's kind of the same thing. The Taliban say that secular government is a joke. Government has to be based on the Word of God. So does the Republican Party. The Taliban are encouraging religious leaders in democratic countries in the Middle East to break the law to seize power. The Republican Party is openly encouraging religious leaders in the United States to break the law, in this case, the so-called Johnson Amendment, our tax laws, to preach politics in the pulpit, to seize political power. Republicans, like the Taliban, also cite Bronze Age religious doctrine in their opposition to rights for LGBTQ folks and in support of state-conducted killings like the Taliban does. The Taliban believes that political power should run from the top down, ignoring the will of the people. Here in America, we have cliches that identify this. Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. Yeah, like the Taliban. The Taliban are intolerant of people of different races or religions, just like Republicans. Donald Trump, the cornerstone of his candidacy in 2016 was, brown-skinned refugees are going to murder and rape your white women. Racism is the animating force behind the so-called Republican militias. And what do we see in the U.S. House of Representatives? The number 2 Republican, Steve Scalise from Louisiana, as is David Duke, described himself, David Duke, the grand wizard of the Klan, Steve Scalise described himself as David Duke without the baggage. And he speaks before white supremacist groups, and he refuses to condemn anti-Semitism. The Taliban are also quite open in their belief, in their assertion that violence is a useful, meaningful, legitimate political tool. Just like the Republicans, who are planning a rally next month in September at the Capitol in support of those patriots who stormed the Capitol, killed 5 people, and tried to assassinate Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. As one Trump Taliban supporter told CNN over the weekend, quote, "There's millions of guns here." He's talking about the United States. It took 11 days for them to take over Afghanistan. Wonder how many days, just asking for a friend, how many days it would take the Patriots to take over this country? Think about it. Right. The Taliban fetishize guns and other weapons. The bigger, the more powerful, the better. Just like, men suffering from sexual insecurity or, misogyny, the hatred of women. Republicans do the same. They use guns and shooting targets as part of their political ads and as giveaways and fundraisers. And they love to intimidate people, Republicans, driving around in pickup trucks with giant flags and lots of weapons, just like the Taliban. Taliban hate public schools just like Republicans do. In fact, Republicans so despise free public education that they work overtime to stop funding of colleges and destroy public K through 12 schools. Most recently, you had, the most recent strategy to destroy our public schools. We had a debate about this on this program a week ago today, last Monday, is to force teachers in public schools, not private schools, but force teachers in public schools to expose themselves to the COVID virus by letting the children of people who watch Fox News all day come into the schools without masks on. And before that, Betsy DeVos would lead a full-scale frontal attack on public schools. The Taliban hate gender minorities, LGBTQ folks. Republicans encourage gay hating and assaults on LGBTQ folks, with their bathroom bills and laws forbidding gay and lesbian couples from adopting children. Ronald Reagan, for 8 years of his presidency, refused to even say the word AIDS at the height of all those deaths. The Taliban looked to wealthy patrons like Saudi Arabia and the UAE to fund them. The Republicans looked to wealthy right-wing billionaires. I mean, what is the difference between the Taliban and the Republican Party? Am I missing something here?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, Trump is an accused serial rapist, a thief, a bully, and an oligarch who openly despises democratic institutions, just like the Taliban. And welcome back. Yeah, and I should have mentioned that the Taliban are anti-science. They're intolerant of other religions. Remember them blowing up those statues, those Hindu statues? Oh my God, we can't have Hinduism. And the Republicans are intolerant of other religions, and they're intolerant of science. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I think it's pretty straightforward stuff. Trump's reasoning, I mean, yesterday at Trump's super spreader event in Alabama, Trump came right out and praised the Taliban. Came right out and said it. He said they're great negotiators. They are tough fighters. He cut the deal for us to pull out of Afghanistan with the Taliban directly and cut the Afghan government, the government that we spent 20 years, 2,000 American lives plus, over 20,000 American casualties. He cut that government out of the negotiations. Said, sorry, you can't have anything to do with these negotiations. We're not going to include you in these negotiations. Am I missing something here? I mean, it seems to me that the difference between the Taliban and Trump is really just a difference of haircuts. And not just Trump, the Republican Party. That the Republican Party know how to put on a suit and behave like they are civilized and all that kind of thing. And the Taliban, they wear big bushy beards and let their hair go a little wild and wear, long dresses, but or whatever they call those things, robes. But that's cosmetic, right? That's differences of appearance. What about the differences of behavior? What about the differences of belief systems? The fundamental Taliban belief system is power flows from the top down, as is the Republican Party's. The fundamental Taliban belief system is men should be in charge of everything. How many women are there in the Republican caucus? The fundamental Taliban belief system is people have to look like us. They've got to be from our tribes. They've got to be Pashtuns, or they've got to be, what you might call Afghans. We can't have different people here. We can't have different religions here. They put people of different religion, who are not Muslims to death. Well, the Republican Party hasn't quite gone that far. But the idea, hey, people who don't look like us, to hell with them, seems to me pretty much to be the same. Or am I missing something? Have I overlooked some fundamental difference between the Republican Party and the United States? I mean, even right down to their logo, the Republican Party has adopted an upside-down five-pointed star as their logo, which is the traditional sign for Satan worshiping. I mean,